Okay, 7th grade, we're going to zip through lesson 2, asexual reproduction, really super fast, okay? There's a lot of slides here, but you can always pause, and we're just going to buzz through this, and you'll get to know a lot about the types of ways that organisms reproduce without sex. Few vocabulary words. You can do these in Quizlet. You should have already seen them at least once, so make sure you take a look at them. Now, in asexual reproduction, our definition here that we need to pay attention to is that you've got one parent produces an offspring, and it doesn't do meiosis, and it doesn't fertilize. Okay, so we're doing mitosis a lot of the time to get this done. And this is a really cool picture. I love this of the, the starfish that regenerates and grows a new. This actually, if you think about it, was the original, and then it starts to grow out the other pieces. So kind of cool stuff here that we got going on. Right now, all offspring get their DNA from one parent, and because they do this, we're always going to have identical offspring. Okay, these are going to be basically what we think of as clones because they're genetically the exact same. If you took the DNA out of one and compared it to an offspring, it would be the same. And remember, cell division in prokaryotes. Now, if you remember, a prokaryote was the type of cell that had just the DNA kind of in the middle. It was circular, and they sometimes have the flagella. We're talking about single-celled simple organisms. Now, in single-celled simple organisms, they do fission. It comes from the Latin fissionum. It means breaking up or a cleaving, cutting in half. Okay, so we're kind of thinking of this as they're going to split into two cells. The way that they do this is they have to actually make a copy of their DNA, and they do this with, just the same types of processes that happen in S phase in a eukaryotic cell, but they make a little copy. So instead of just one string here, you can see that there are now two. And then these two sides, the two bacteria DNAs will go to each side, and then they'll split. And that's fission. The original cell no longer exists, so you've got two new offspring from your original. Now, when you have a eukaryotic cell, which, if you remember, means that you have a nucleus and you've got organelles, okay, so it's a little bit more complicated. In this type of reproduction, we call it mitotic cell division because they're actually going to go through the whole process of mitosis, which is different than just the DNA splitting to both sides of the cell, and that's it. So in this type of asexual reproduction, you get mitosis happening. And so you're going to have to know the difference between when mitotic cell division happens and when fission happens. So pay attention to that in your reading. Okay, a couple of other types. Budding. We got the Hydra example here, where this little guy is starting to grow a new one, and it will fall off, and it will grow into its own new organism. And it's, again, a genetically identical, but it has to wait till the bud is large enough, and then it can break off from the parent and live on its own. In animal regeneration, I know you guys are super excited about getting our planarian in, and I'm excited about it too, but in animal regeneration, you're going to have a piece of the parent that will regenerate the whole thing. So in this case, we're going to get the back side and the front side, and both of them will grow into a whole new organism. Now, you might have seen some examples of like salamanders and things where you can cut off the tail and their tail regrows. That's regeneration also, but it's not a form of reproduction because you're not creating a new organism. It's just regeneration. And your cells regenerate too whenever you get hurt. Okay? All right, sea stars, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, planarians, they all do this regeneration stuff. It's pretty awesome. That right there's a sea cucumber. I think it's pretty cool looking. They're interesting because they kind of spit out their guts in defense, and maybe we can look at a video of that sometime. It's kind of cool. Now, like I said, You've got the times when you can regenerate a tail and stuff, but remember, this is not reproduction. Vegetative reproduction, these are the strawberry examples. Strawberries do this. I have strawberries in my garden. They'll send out these runners. This part of it will take root, and then you'll get new strawberry plants that are close by. So that's called vegetative reproduction. Cloning. Okay, this is really an interesting thing that has been developed over the last 20 to 30 years. Okay, it is something that we think of in a laboratory. It produces identical individuals from a cell, one cell, or a cluster of cells that you take from a multicellular organism. And I put a bunch of sheep here because this is like Dolly the sheep, who is the first successful animal reproduction, or a cell cloning. Okay, so the way that this works, you've got sheep X and sheep Y. You're going to then have cells taken from them. This one, you remove the cell from sheep X, and you remove a cell that's an unfertilized egg from sheep Z. You take out the DNA very carefully in a lab. You fuse these two together so they become one cell, okay? But it only has the DNA from this one. It doesn't have any of the DNA from this one. Okay, so the single cell then, they put it into a laboratory, into good conditions for growth, and it grows into an embryo. And then what they do is they take the embryo and implant it into sheep Z to kind of carry the baby until it's ready to be born. And then when it is born, it turns out to be a clone of your original sheep X. And that's how cloning works, at least in this first instance with Dolly. This was an actual sheep. This was actually how they did it. So pretty fascinating. Okay. Now, in a method of tissue culture, we can do what's called vegetative. Okay, so they take root cells and they put it in agar, and then they take some of these cells that they've grown and let them kind of develop into embryos. And young plants can then grow, and they can plant them into soil, and they can develop into a mature carrot. And so this is tissue culture, and just ways to, in a lab, grow and clone plants. Okay. Now, the way that we use the word tissue culture in this sense is not the same as what you might be used to. In science, culture is the process of growing living tissue in a lab. So when we culture stem cells and we culture bacteria, that's how we use that word. In a common usage, it's like the social customs of a group of people, but that's not what we're talking about. All right, because all of a clone's chromosomes come from one parent, that Dolly sheep and the carrots, they all are genetic copies. And so that's what we mean by cloning. And that's why really it's grouped in with asexual reproduction. Okay? Asexual reproduction, here we're talking about the advantages and disadvantages, or we're about to. And I apologize, but the headings up here are not going to match. So you need to figure out where these go in your notes on your own, which I'm sure you can do. But asexual reproduction, an advantage is that you don't need any mates. You don't have to take the time and the energy to find a mate. You're also going to be able to produce an extremely large number of offspring in a very short amount of time. Depending on the species, you can do asexual reproduction within even sometimes just a matter of hours. You can create, new copies, and then in just days you can have lots and lots and lots of offspring. Now, they are genetically identical always to their parents, and this I could see making into a test question: which type of reproduction it makes genetically identical offspring, and that's always going to be the asexual kind. Okay, this is a disadvantage because they don't have any genetic variation. Because of sexual reproduction, okay, this would be sexual, you can have different colors of moths and different varieties of cats and different varieties of humans. But because of asexual reproduction, you're going to have genetically identical things. These happen to be bacteria right here, okay, prokaryotic. All right. genetic variation is important because it can increase our chances of survival if something happens. These are moths that they blended into a tree at one time in history, and then the Industrial Revolution happened, and the white ones no longer blended in. But you can see right down here, some of them blended in because there was variation, and so this type of moth actually became more common than the white kind because they had the variation. But with exact copies, none of this would happen. Okay, you just wouldn't have any of it. All right, the other thing that can happen is that mutations can occur, and this means that mistakes can happen, and they get passed on to offspring, and they can affect the offspring's ability to survive. So this is one of the disadvantages also listed in your book. Crabgrass and other types of things that reproduce asexually can spread really quickly because they are reproducing asexually. So this is actually kind of an advantage, like I was saying before. So make sure you understand the differences and the advantages and disadvantages between and asexual reproduction. One really big idea here for this whole chapter, wrapping it up, is that the types of reproduction ensure the survival of our species. Whether you do it with sex or without sex, we can't survive without reproducing and making copies of ourselves. Have a great day.